Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Monday, and welcome to this live stream with me, Dr. Aparajita Jirigunta. I am the founder and CEO of AJ Rao LLC, where we do intentional inclusion and equity work, and we also do whole person leadership development because we believe in making the invisible visible for better belongingness, better leadership, and better business. For those of you who are joining in live, welcome. And if you're watching this later, I hope you enjoy this. I want to get right into the topic today, that is how to have difficult diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness conversations with your people. The reason I want to have this conversation, and I wanted to do that, the reason I'm doing this episode today, rather, is because this is something that I'm seeing a lot happening in the space, especially on LinkedIn, where leaders are almost afraid of doing or saying the wrong thing, and so nothing is getting done. Yet at the same time, anytime that somebody is thinking out of the box and being innovative and creative about including more people, those innovators and creatives are getting shut down because they're not following the status quo of what is expected. So with everything that's happening in the country right now, especially as we are hurtling towards our presidential election, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness have become very hot topics. They've always been hot topics, but this is especially salient right now. And considering the fact that, unemployment rates are high, unhappiness in jobs is high. The burnout and fatigue that I was talking about in my live stream on from last Friday is also very high. The idea that people thrive when they feel like they belong in any community, in any organization, or in any team, and that when they feel like they belong, that's when you're going to see their engagement go up, their loyalty go up, their productivity go up, and your turnover rates and your attrition rates will come down. That belongingness is the key for your business to thrive into this future, even in the face of all of the uncertainties that we currently face and all of the uncertainties that we have yet to learn about that are inevitably going to happen, that we have to face in the future. So given all of that, how do we have difficult conversations about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness? Now, this episode of live stream is going to be more about me sort of talking about how to think about this rather than how to do it. And the reason I say that is because having conversations about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness requires strategy before tactics. Right now, everybody's focused on the tactics, but there is no cohesive strategy behind it. There is no cohesive, greater purpose behind these conversations other than to check off business goals and boxes. And as long as we focus on just checking off those boxes, no matter whatever solutions we think we are implementing are not going to be sustainable for the benefit of our teams and our organizations. So today I want to talk about how do you go about having these difficult conversations? How do you think about having difficult conversations with your people? And at the end of this, I do have an ask, and that is for research purposes. I would love to know in comments, what are some of the difficult conversations or difficult questions that you felt were difficult, that you have been asked, or that you wanted to ask of other people, but you just didn't know how because they were difficult, and so you never took that step? What are these difficult questions for you? I'm doing this for research purposes, actually, for some friends of mine who are doing some research onto the in the you know in on the nature of these types of conversations. So if you have any if you've had any conversations where you felt like they were difficult conversations, what were they about? What were the specific questions? Please drop them in the comments, whether you're watching this live or watching this later, so that I can forward those questions along to my friends. And that's just a small ask I have for anybody listening to this now or anytime in the near future. So with that being said, let's get into it. And so, how do you have difficult conversations with people, right? Especially about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness. I am going to answer that question with a question first. What is difficult? How are you defining difficult, right? Because what may be difficult to you or for you may not be difficult for somebody else. And what I mean by that, I'm going to look at my notes here, is are you defining difficulty based on your current comfort level? Or is it a real difficulty because of a capability issue? And I'm going to repeat that. Are you defining difficult based on how uncomfortable a conversation may make you? Or are you basing it on some kind of a real difficulty because of incompatible capabilities or unequal capabilities or unfulfilled capabilities? Let's put it that way. So the reason I ask that is because talking to human beings about what they need to thrive is not actually difficult. We think it is. We make it difficult because it's uncomfortable for us. But it's actually not that difficult. So if you are going into a conversation because of your comfort level, you're labeling it difficult, how are you automatically priming and setting the stage for an unproductive conversation? I'll give you an example. And this is, it may be a funny example, but, I don't know. Let's see how you receive it. Ever been the receiver of the phrase, hey, we need to talk? Right? If you have, put it in the comments. If you've ever been, if you've ever heard that, hey, we need to talk, and your heart instantly dropped and you're like, oh gosh, what did I do? What is wrong? Is so-and-so going to break up with me? Am I going to get fired? Am I about to lose a friend? What is going on? Right? Inherently, your reaction to that and how you frame that determines the context of the conversation, right? So for instance, I can tell my spouse, hey, we need to talk. Or I could say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about something that I've been mulling over. Can we make some time? Do you see how different those are? And that's the same concept that's applied in this context to when you go in thinking, oh gosh, this is going to be a difficult conversation. Guess what? It is going to be difficult and it is going to be unproductive because in your head, you're already thinking of all of these problems that are going to come up to where you're not focused on the solutions. And what we put our energy into is what we get. As one of my coaches, Carolina Aramburo, always says, we never get what we expect. We always get what we inspect. Think about that. And that's from Coach Carolina Aramburu. We never get what we expect. We always get what we inspect. So if you are inspecting this upcoming conversation and you're thinking, this is going to be difficult, this part of it is going to be difficult, that part of it is going to be difficult, and you're focused on the difficulty and you're inspecting the difficulty to try and minimize it, you're actually creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where the conversation is going to be difficult and unproductive. So think about, when you want to have these kind of conversations about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness, think about when you say it's going to be difficult, what exactly is difficult about it? How are you defining difficult? And why are you defining difficult in the way that you are? Is it because of your comfort level? Is it because of your lack of knowledge about something? Or again, is there a real problem that's going to cause a difficulty there? Because chances are it really is about the comfort level or your uncertainty that you don't know how the other person is going to respond. Usually that's what it boils down to. The other thing you should also think about is who you are being when you decide that something is difficult. And I really mean this from the perspective, and when I say what I'm about to say, I do want to preface it by saying I am by no means speaking for all people of color everywhere. I am by no means speaking for all marginalized people in the history of the planet or in the history of America. That is, I'm not about to get tokenized that way. I don't want to be. I am speaking from my perspective and my understanding and my expertise as a consultant, strategist, and a coach in this space. When I ask you, who are you being when you decide that something is difficult, you're coming from a space of your ego when you decide something is difficult. It's very different if somebody else tells you, this is a difficult conversation for me. Because then you get to say, oh, okay, please tell me why, right? But if you automatically go in saying, we need to have this difficult conversation or we need to tackle this difficult issue, that's you making that decision. So who are you being in that, in that time by framing it that way? Especially, like I was saying, especially when it comes to if you are having these conversations with people who have been historically marginalized, this is their lived experience you're probably going to be talking about. When you're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness, you most likely are going to be talking about their lived experiences and where they have felt like they have belonged or not. That is a reality of their lives, right? Yes, it's going to be emotional. Yes, it is going to be sensitive, but that does not make it difficult. Because emotional and sensitive are both things that you can respond well to proactively if you go in with the right mindset, if you go in with nothing but curiosity and vulnerability, if you go in owning that, okay, this is going to be uncomfortable for me because I don't know how the other person is going to respond, and that is okay. It is not my job to dictate how the other person responds. It is my responsibility to listen to the other person, to not put my emotional labels on the other person's lived experience, and to receive everything that they have to tell me, because that's not difficult. Listening is not practiced enough, but it's not difficult, right? So who are you being when you decide that something is difficult? And in line with that, as I was saying, when you decide that something is difficult, whose narrative are you changing? Whose voice are you minimizing or pushing aside for your comfort level, right? Because again, it is not something that if you have an employee that feels like they don't belong, if you have an employee or a team that is not thriving right now, then it is your responsibility to give them what they need so that they can thrive. Can you fulfill all of their needs? I don't know. But until you have that conversation with an open mind, and until you don't change their narrative, until you let them tell you their story, until you empower them to tell you their story, you won't know what to do to help your employees thrive. And to empower somebody to say, I'm here, please tell me your story, I'm listening, that's actually, again, not difficult. It's uncomfortable, it's uncertain, but it's not difficult, right? So please keep that in mind. When you decide something is difficult, whose narrative are you changing, and how are you changing what you hear from them? As this, oh my God, this is so uncomfortable, this is so difficult, is just going on and on and on in your head. How is that going to color and shape your perception of the situation and of the other person? And if you're going in this uncomfortable, emotional contagion is real, y'all. Emotional contagion is how nonverbal cues are transmitted from person to person. How do I know this? Well, because this is a fact of human nature. It's actually beyond humans. Emotional contagion happens in people too. Emotions are like a virus. They are contagious. Think about those times when you wanted to have a meeting or a one-on-one with your boss or supervisor. You walk into that room or into that Zoom call lately, and you see the scowl on their face or you see this frown on their face, and you immediately go, oh crap. This is not a good time for me to talk about the things that I need, because obviously the other person is not in a good mood. That puts them in a bad, now you're in a bad mood because you can't get what you need. You can't even ask for what you need. Your narrative is changed because of that, because of emotional contagion. Similarly, actually identically, when you go into anything framing it as difficult, you change the context of the whole conversation. You are not going to get the outcome you want out of it. So please keep that in mind. And then finally, who do you need to be to reframe difficult in your mind? Because again, these are not difficult conversations, right? They are sensitive. They can be emotionally laden. They of course are going to tap into everybody's vulnerability, everybody's curiosity, everybody involved. But they are critical and necessary conversations because they are about people thriving. They are about people getting what they need. They are about people not fulfilling or certain aspects of the job, or not being able to fulfill certain aspects of the job because they're not getting what they need. They're just not feeling that connection. At the end of the day, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness comes back to that connection, that real human connection that we feel. So who do you need to be to reframe the idea of difficult in your mind so that you understand that that label is coming from you? The reality of the situation is that these conversations are not difficult if you don't think that. Again, they are sensitive, they are emotional, and they are vulnerable, but they're not difficult. So when you reframe your idea of difficult conversations around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness, and you realize these are just sensitive topics, that these are just topics where you just need to be sensitive to the other person. And sensitivity requires just listening, hearing, seeing. Sensitivity, it involves the senses, right? Sensitivity is always about the senses. So how can you be more sensitive? How can you listen better? How can you catch the verbal cues better? How can you understand the other person better when you step out of your own mind, out of your own framework, out of your own ego, and when you can actually empathize with the other person? Because empathy is difficult to practice and to build as a sustainable behavior, but having empathy does not make things difficult. So instead of thinking how to have difficult conversations with your people, who do you need to be to reframe that to how do I get to have empathetic conversations with my people? How can I actually really hear and read and see my people better than I ever have before by stepping out of my own comfort zone and being vulnerable, by not going into these conversations from a place of fear? Because at the end of the day, when you make decisions, our decisions always come from one of two places, and we always make our decisions based on emotions, but we justify them with our logic. We all know this, especially if we're, have done any sort of marketing or any sort of sales. We know that decisions are made with emotions, but then justified by logic. And the two primary emotions that leaders can tap into are fear or love. When you say you're going to have a difficult conversation, you're stepping in from a place of fear. Who do you need to be to reframe that in your head to step in from a place of love? To create the space where the other people that you are speaking to realize they are going to be heard. They are going to be listened to. Because that is then stepping in from a place of love. That is then stepping in from a place of inspiration. That is being a whole person leader, right? A holistic, conscientious, compassionate leader, right? So in order to get their buy-in, you have to step in from a place of love, not from a place of fear. And as long as you think about things in terms of difficulty, I promise you, you are stepping in from a place of fear, and ultimately, you are not going to get the outcomes that you so deeply want so that you can empower your employees and your people to thrive. Because every good leader I know, that's what they want at the end of the day. Every good leader I know, at the end of the day, their bottom line is how can they empower and inspire their people to be the best versions of themselves and to thrive. And thriving does not happen from a place of fear. And so as long as you step in from a place of fear, you're creating a space of fear. Other people are going to come into it from a place of fear. And there's going to be no thriving. So how to have difficult conversations? Once again, as a recap, think about what is difficult, how are you defining it, and why are you defining it in that way? Is it because of your comfort zone, or is there a real technical issue happening there? Then think about who you are being when you decide that something is difficult. Think about your privilege. Think about all of the gaps in your knowledge. And think about how you need to step into those with vulnerability and curiosity. That's inclusive leadership mindset right there. Then you think about whose narrative are you changing when you start calling things difficult? Because I'll tell you this, as a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner, yes, the work is exhausting. Day in and day out, having to do this, it can be exhausting, especially when when you're not heard. But again, the work is not difficult. We're dealing with human beings. It's sensitive. And then the last one is so whose narrative are you changing when you decide something is difficult? And again, the last one, who do you need to be to reframe the idea of difficulty in your mind so that you go into these conversations from a place of love instead of a place of fear? Like I said, the whole point of this live stream was to talk about more about how to go about thinking about these instead of how to actually implement various tactics. Because with this framework that I've just laid out for you, you can implement whatever tactics you want because you're going to be going in from from a place of love and from a place of vulnerability, from a place of curiosity, and a place where you put your ego aside for the sake of conversations about real human needs. And when you do that, you are going to get the outcomes that you want, no matter what tactics you use. And those tactics are going to be sustainable because people will realize you authentically and genuinely care about them. And when that happens, boom, the connection is made. You're on your way to building a cohesive, committed, productive team. So I hope this live stream helps you. And like I said, my little ask for you is please, if you've had these difficult conversations in the past or if you're about to, I would love to know what the topics were, what were some of the questions that you faced difficulty on, so on and so forth. I do have some friends who are working on some research in this area, so I'm just trying to do them a favor by crowdsourcing what these types of topics are, specifically within diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness. Are they conversations about hiring? Are they conversations about how to properly include someone? Are they conversations about how to let go of someone? Are they conversations about salary and price negotiations? Are they something else? I would love to hear from you about what these conversations are that you've been having difficulty with. So please drop your questions that you've had difficulty with in the comments. I'll address them for you, and I'll help you, and I'll support you on that too. That's my little gift for you. And then my friends who are doing this research will get the questions that they need from this. So that's about it for me for today. I will be back. And this was my Manifestation Monday video. So I hope you manifest sensitive conversations from now on, not difficult conversations, because that's the direction that we need to go in so that we realize these conversations are not difficult. They're critical. They're necessary. And they're the ones that are going to help us move the needle towards equity and belongingness and thriving for all of us. So that's it for me for Manifestation Monday. I will be back on Focus Friday at noon right here. Bye.